What is going on, everybody? AHS Rules back again with another video, another NBA related video. This is kind of something, again, I want to say this in a lot of my videos. It's something I've been working on and thinking about for a while. This one, not as much work went into it as the Trailblazers video, but I at least have 2 pages of notes in this one. The Trailblazers only had 1. But again, I'm going to say this in a lot of my videos. It's the weird part of the NBA season where the playoffs are almost right here. We already know the teams that are not going to be in it. Cough, cough, the Rockets. And we already know that certain teams that are like top tier, big dogs, like Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics. But like, I wouldn't really be entertained or have fun making a video on the Bucks or the Celtics. I'm kind of looking at the teams that I have a lot of questions about, or teams that I want to see move in a different direction, like the Portland Trailblazers, who are in that middle of that pack where they could possibly miss the playoffs and play in, or they could do. All right, I lied. They not win a title, but it's just like I want to see them move in a different direction, and I spent a whole freaking video talking about the direction I want to see them go and what led them up to that point in the history. So it's going to be the same thing with this one, but I don't have a solution for this team. It's more of a question that will obviously be answered in the offseason that, we're just going to jump right into it. There's one thing that I noticed about my videos that I don't really know how to fix, is that every video I do, I wear a hat. NBA at least, I wear a hat if I'm talking about a team, or even in my last video where I was talking about the big threes, I was wearing I don't think I was wearing a hat in the video, so I lied. But you get the point. So in this video, I am talking about the 76ers. So if you get what the problem is, y'all can't see the hat unless I wear it like this, which I feel stupid in. And like I'm not crouching, and I don't really have any angle that like you would be able to see the hat from. And even if I could fix it, like the hat, I always wear my hats up. That's kind of how I've always worked. So anyways, I do have a 76ers hat on right now, and y'all can see it there. But the 76ers have very much been like both the teams that I've made a video on, the Portland Trailblazers and the Brooklyn Nets. They are very, very similar. Now, one of the main difference is that they've had a lot of failures like the Portland Trailblazers, but they've had a lot of talent, real talent on their team like the Brooklyn Nets. I have a whole list of notable players that were once on the 76ers in like the past 5-ish years, 6 maybe, because I put one guy who a lot of people forget was on the team, so we'll get to that when we get to it. Like I said, in this video, very similar to the Trailblazers and Nets video, I'm going to talk about the rosters, some of the mistakes they made. No, actually, that's different. I'm adding a different element to it, because the 76ers, unlike the Nets and the Trailblazers, have made a lot of mistakes. And I probably could have done this for those 2 teams, but the 76ers' mistakes are really noticeable. So in this, I'm going to go through draft history, playoff history, roster not really lineups, rosters, and what should be next for the team. Because, again, spoiler alert, I don't see this team winning a title. Now, if you were to ask me at the beginning of the season, I thought the 76ers were going to be the best team in the East, because this is the best offseason that they had. And I expected them to be way better, because I expected Joel Embiid to win MVP as well. Because I'm like, the past 2 seasons, Joel Embiid had MVP caliber seasons, and it was with, I'm not going to say lackluster. Like last year's roster, beginning of the year, was very lackluster. The year prior was questionable, but I didn't expect him to make that big of an MVP jump that he did. But obviously, he lost to Nikola Jokic. And it's probably going to, I don't think it bothers him. I think what bothers him is playoff failures, which again, we're going to get to that. But it definitely would suck to lose 3 MVPs to Jokic. Well, like I said, with the MVP race every year, and this might be a future video, I doubt it, but like the MVP race every year, the very beginning of the season, there's like 10 players that could win it, because right off the bats, they're hitting and swinging and doing very well. And then we get to the All-Star break, and there are 3 guys. 2 that are very noticeable and in the hunt, and then that 3rd guy that you can question it. So with this year, it's Jokic, then Giannis, then Tatum. Because I feel that whichever team wins out east, like the Bucks or Celtics, whichever teams finish with the first seed, there's going to be that big push for one of those two to get MVP. So, for example, last year, the whole race was Jokic and Embiid the whole time. And then Giannis had a great end of the season. They really tried to push the agenda. And the most noticeable one, and the one I started really noticing this, 2020. The whole year, the race was between Giannis and Harden. And then LeBron, I remember specifically, it was right before the pandemic happened. There was a game against the Bucks against Friday. The Lakers faced the Bucks on Friday night, and they faced the Clippers on Sunday day. And the Lakers won, and they tried to push the LeBron MVP agenda, even though it had been between Giannis and Harden all year. So, Embiid, I thought, was going to be an MVP front runner this year. I thought it was going to be his year to win MVP because this is the best roster that I'm not going to say the best roster. He's definitely not the best roster he had. The best off season they had, and I thought they were going to start with strides, but they're the third seed at this moment. And I can still see them finish as a third seed. And the main problem with the 76ers is there's nothing they can really do to overcome the top two teams, which in this scenario, they're going to have to face one of them in the playoffs and probably in the second round. You would love to face a Celtics or Bucks in the conference finals, but that's just not going to be the case. So, looking at the rosters, I'm going to quickly go through the rosters because I spent a long time talking about them in the next video. In 2017-18, they had Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Joel Embiid, Markelle Fultz, T.J. McConnell, Ersan Ilyasova, Jared Bayless, Marco Bellinelli, and Jahlil Okafor. Now, this is a very weird season because this was Simmons' rookie year and Embiid's second year because the year prior he played 20-ish games and then got hurt, but he was fantastic in those games. It's just very rarely do we see young players, even though they had experience under their belts. It's just they were in a weird circumstance where they were injured and didn't get to play. But it's very weird that a young team makes this big of a jump this very quickly. And at the 3 seed, they took the Heat. They beat the Heat in the first round 4-1. And then they lost to the Celtics 1-4, which that's going to be a theme in this. But the weird thing about this season, they had the number 1 pick. They obviously traded it with the Celtics, which, again, I'm going to go through draft history, trade history. Not every single trade. Notable trades. So, draft history, I'm not really going to spend that much time on because we already know who was on the team when. Joel Embiid was the 3rd pick in 2014, missed his first 2 years. Jahlil Okafor, who had a good start to his career, but at some point, and they also had Nerlens Noel in 2013. And you got 3 centers, it wasn't going to really work out. And obviously, Embiid was the best one out of all of them. Jahlil Okafor, sadly, is not in the league anymore. Nerlens Noel just got bought out. Who knows what team he's going to sign with? So they obviously made the right choice. Ben Simmons, 1st pick, 2016. I have talked about Ben Simmons a lot in my previous videos, and I have to talk about him a lot now. It is what it is. But Markelle Fultz, like I said, they traded they traded with the Celtics to get the 1st overall pick, and it just didn't work out. This kind of been the case with the 76ers. They were just drafted who they thought was the best player, and obviously in hindsight, it was very wrong. They should have drafted Jason Tatum. Also, it is very weird in hindsight. I'm not going to go on the whole spiel that they should have drafted Jaylen Brown over Ben Simmons. The Ben Simmons draft pick looks very weird in hindsight. So, 2017-18 season, I'm not going to talk that much about it just because they're very young and I don't think anything was expected out of them that year. But to have that big of a jump and even make the second round was definitely a good note for them. Then the 2018 offseason happens. Or the 2018-19 season happens. And like I said, I have 5 biggest mistakes that this team made over the past couple years. At 5, I have the asterisk. I have drafted Markelle Fultz. I think it's a 50-50, possibly 75-25 situation where I think the injury really hurt him and affected how he played with the team. But I also thought that fit-wise, I never really saw him being able to fit on the team. That's kind of like the 75-20. You could debate which was the actual problem. I think it was the injury. But like I said, I have an asterisk next to drafting Markelle Fultz. I have that as a 5th mistake. Considering they could have drafted Jason Tatum, I'm not going to talk about it because a lot of other people talk about it. It's just something that, obviously, in hindsight, you would have changed. Now, this is the number 2 biggest mistake that they made. And, again, at the time, they probably thought they were doing the right thing. But as of right now, this player would really help their team. And again, this is another thing that constantly gets brought up. They had Mikal Bridges. They drafted him with the 10th pick. It was a big deal because he's from the Philly area, wanted to go to Philly. His mom, I think, worked for the 76ers in the front office. I don't know her exact role. And then they traded him. The worst part of it is they traded him for Zaire Smith, who I looked at. He never did anything for the 76ers. Never played. And I just always remember when I was the 76ers and watching, like, he never did nothing. He did nothing. That's the whole problem. They got another pick out of it, which that pick didn't equate to anything. It's just like, this is a terrible, terrible trade. And I don't know why they even thought of it, it just didn't work out whatsoever. I have that as their second biggest mistake. Because like I said, I'm not a draft guy. I don't know everything about college prospects and whatnot. But it's just like, it's definitely terrible. And they just could have stayed the same. But to be fair, if they would have kept him, there's a possibility he would have got traded. Because the 2018-19 season is mainly noted for two big things. Actually, three. We'll get to the third one. The two big things is they made two massive trades. And again, like I have this top 5 list of biggest mistakes they made. The number one we'll be getting to, but like I said, this season is mainly known for trading for Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. But guess what? That kept him at the 3 seed. They gave up Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Jared Bayless for Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton in November. And then February, days before the trade deadline, they traded Wilson Chandler, Landry Shamet, Mike Muscala, and 2 first-round picks for Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, shout out Bobby, and Mike Scott, who pretty much they just traded because the other, like Mike Scott did play for the Sixers, but it's just they pretty much traded for Tobias Harris. And the main thing that I remember about this real era of the 76ers is they had a Sports Illustrated cover. And again, in hindsight, that looks terrible considering the team played like 3 months of basketball together with the main 5. Like I said, so this season, I broke the roster down into 4 different pieces. People there the whole year, notable people that were there the whole year, which was Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Joel Embiid, and T.J. McConnell. The people that got traded, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Landry Shamet, Markelle Fultz, who played the first 19 games and was iffy, and then sat out, and then obviously he got traded for a first-round pick. It was just kind of a distraction to the team and just a big question mark, and they're like, we don't really see a future with him. Luckily, he's with the Magic, and he hasn't had a bad, he's definitely been good there. He just got hurt again when he was with Orlando, and he's just had a very, very weird NBA career, but I am not going to use that B word on him because I don't like saying it. And then, again, the notable people that got traded there, Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. Now, the big thing with these two guys is that they were free agents. And we all remember Jimmy Butler had the whole argument, debacle with Minnesota, and I'm not going to say he fought his way out of Minnesota, but he really wanted out of Minnesota. And Tobias Harris, who had a very all-star level season, was going to want big money, and the Clippers are they were in that retooling, rebuilding era, and they probably weren't going to pay him all the money, so they just traded him for Philly and got stuff out of it. But, like I said, the main 3 things that this season was remembered for. I'm not going to call them a super team. I just made a whole video talking about super teams. This is not a super team in my opinion. But the main things they remember for this season. Jimmy Butler trade, Tobias Harris trade, Kawhi Leonard shot. Probably the most heartbreaking moment in 76ers history because this was probably, if we're looking at all these years, probably their best chance to win a title. It's definitely debatable. And if you were to go back in time and change stuff, obviously the butterfly effect would come into effect. Because hypothetically, let's say if Kawhi Leonard misses that shot, they go into overtime. It's still not a guarantee they win in overtime, but again, in this hypothetical, they win in overtime. They got to face the Milwaukee Bucks, which this was their first time in the conference finals, their first time making this big of a jump. And obviously they crumbled under the wall that they built, stopping Giannis, and the rest of the guys did not help him out. And so, again, in this hypothetical, I'm not going to say all you had to do is to build a wall and stop Giannis, but this team definitely had the same level of players as the Raptors did and defensive-minded players like the Raptors did to beat the Bucks. And so, again, hypothetically, they're going to the finals, and they're going against the Warriors. And I'm going to say KD's not there. I'll say KD's not there because he got hurt in the second round. Where Clay, he got hurt in the finals. Because, again, if you're going back in time and changing stuff, certain things wouldn't happen. And the Clay injury probably doesn't happen. The KD one might, just because he already had suffered an injury in the second round. So you're in the finals. Who really knows? But, like I said, if you were to look at everything else and the rest of the teams they'd have to compete with, this is probably their best chance. A young, up-and-coming Bucks team and an injured Warriors team. While you have Jimmy Butler, who's probably the second best player you had there, and like at the time, probably your first best player. You can debate between him and Embiid, but like it's definitely your second best player, tenure-wise. Like I know Ben Simmons had the All-Star appearances, it was up-and-coming, but looking at it now, who would you rather have? So, obviously, I'm not going to dwell more about this season, but that offseason was one of the most disastrous of all time. Now, I don't write down odds and didn't look at the odds for every season, but I remember specifically, people were very high on the 76ers after the 2019 offseason going into the 2020 season. I, however, knew this Al Horford signing was not going to be good. Was it going to be bad as I thought it was going to be? No. I definitely didn't expect it. I didn't think it made them title contenders like everybody else did. But, again, I know when I do a top 5 list, I should have the number 1 be last, the big successful. But obviously, the number 1 mistake the 76ers has made over the past couple years is not bringing back Jimmy Butler. Joel Embiid loved him. You had to overpay for Tobias Harris, which they probably would have paid him a lot of money anyways. But it's just like you had to pay him even more because you couldn't afford to lose both of them, and you only bring in Al Horford, which, again, that's mistake number 3. So I've already mentioned 5 of these mistakes, or 4 of the 5 mistakes. I just never thought the Al Horford sign was going to work. The whole joke was when they signed Al Horford, they're like, well, he's the main guy that stopped Embiid in the playoffs, and like now he can't. But it's just like, position-wise, I didn't think it would work. They moved him to power forward, and just all this 2019-20 season was disastrous. I will admit, I was a bit high on the Josh Richardson trade because obviously it was a sign and trade. They gave the Heat Jimmy Butler. They got Josh Richardson back. It was a 4-team trade, but that was the main piece that came back for Philly. I was very high on the Josh Richardson trade because he just had a career year in Miami, but it just never translated to Philly. And then he got traded to Dallas. Never translated to Dallas. He got traded. He was definitely on another team. He was on Boston. And then he got traded to San Antonio. Then now he's in New Orleans, which he hasn't really played that much, so I can't really talk about it. But in San Antonio, he was very good, but it's just like there was nobody really in his way, or all these other teams there was. So, they were second in the East, 5th overall after this offseason. And like I said, I never expected this team to do very well, and they just didn't. This year, it was mainly remembered for this bad signing. They were very good at home, very bad on the road. And this year, the team was Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Joel Embiid, Trey Burke, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, who they drafted, and was a very good draft pick for them. Mike Scott, Kyle Quinn, and Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson III, who they traded for. And to be fair, didn't really have that big of an effect on the team. And there's no real, that was the only notable trade they did that year. I'm not going to spend that much time on this season because, like I said, it was just a bad season. They finished at the 6th seed. The bubble obviously happens, and Ben Simmons gets hurt in the bubble, and they have to face the Celtics again and get swept this time around. It's just very bad. It is very, very bad. But that offseason happens, and Daryl Morey comes in, which I will admit, I'm not going to say I was upset Daryl Morey went to the 76ers, but I remember he specifically left the Rockets to say, yeah, I want to take some time away from basketball, and almost immediately was with the 76ers. I thought that was a very funny thing. But he went to work. He only had to give up a first-round pick to get rid of Al Horford and brought in Danny Green, who, again, at the time, it was questionable because Danny Green had that shaky playoff performance with the Lakers, but he's definitely experienced and fit well with the 76ers. And then probably the best trade that they did, this debate, I don't know. A trade that I probably didn't expect to work out, but it really did. They traded Josh Richardson for Seth Curry. And I mainly was still probably valuing Josh Richardson a little bit too high, but obviously Seth Curry really fit the team. And this was the best season that the team had. They finished as the first seed. Like I said earlier, this was the big year that Joel Embiid had the big jump. And they drafted very well in the 2020 season because they drafted Tyrese Maxey at 21. Now, the team this year was Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Ken Korkmaz, who I will admit, he's been on this team for a long time, but he's never really played that significant of a role. And it's very funny also because he requested a trade and didn't this year. But I just want to mention him this year because I probably would forget to mention him any other time. Dwight Howard, which was an underrated signing, but obviously he didn't play that much, and it didn't really equate to the end of all because Joel Embiid had this big of a jump. And they had Tony Bradley at one point, who they traded for George Hill, but like the Alec Burks trade, didn't really amount to anything. And it's very weird. So this playoff run is the noticeable part or turning point for this team, and mainly the core. Because they faced the Wizards in the first round. And Joel Embiid gets hurt in Game 4. And Game 4 is mainly known for the Ben Simmons hack-a-shack, foul Ben Simmons and get him to the free throw line. It's also very funny because this has become relevant recently because there's a report and rumor that Ben Simmons got mad that he was getting fouled so much, and he confronted Bradley Beal and the rest of the Wizards about it, quit fouling me. And they're like, no, make the shots. And then he was like, I bet $5,000 that I do. And Bradley Beal said, I bet 20. He didn't make them. And then it was just kind of up in the air at that. Luckily, they finished in Game 5 because Joel Embiid did not play in Game 5. And I will admit, I did think in my head a little bit, maybe the Wizards can come back and win this series if they keep doing this to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid doesn't come back. But obviously it didn't. They won in Game 5 and went on to face the Atlanta Hawks. Oh boy. I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm 90% sure Ben Simmons did not score in the fourth quarter of at least Game 4, 5, 6, and 7. This series is mainly known for Ben Simmons not showing up. And I don't like to talk bad about Ben Simmons because I like Ben Simmons. But that is pretty much what this is mistake number 4. The last mistake I'll cover for this team. Mistake number 4 was having been out there in the 2021 playoffs. Tyrese Maxey, which again, it's very weird. It's very similar to what the Utah Jazz had to deal with Rudy Gobert, because in their playoff run that same year, they were giving a lot of money to Rudy Gobert, which Ben and Rudy were neck and neck in the Defensive Player of the Year award race that year. But obviously they should have been played off the court just compared to what the teams were doing to them. They were playing to their flaws. Ben Simmons, they were wanting him to shoot, trying to foul him so that he would have to shoot free throws, and he couldn't. Rudy Gobert, they were shooting threes, and he cannot guard the three, and it was just bothering him. And like I said, I think mistake number 4 is just having been out there, especially because Tyrese Maxey in this playoff run was very good, but he's very young, very inexperienced. I understand not wanting to rely on Tyrese Maxey for a whole playoff series, at least in the latter parts, but obviously I think we would have done better than Ben. And you can't blame the whole failure on this playoff run on Ben Simmons, because I did neglect to mention, just because I forgot to mention Doc Rivers. This is the first year with Doc Rivers. Brett Brown, who he gets some of the blame. He probably shouldn't have, because he really tried to get Ben Simmons to shoot threes and just to shoot more in general, and obviously he just never did under the Brett Brown tenure. And then he left. Then they brought in Doc Rivers, who has a questionable playoff history. It just was not a perfect recipe for Philly. Game 7 happens. Again, this gets brought up a lot, so I'm going through it quickly. Ben Simmons passes the ball to Matisse Thybulle to get fouled, so he doesn't have to go to the free throw line. And like I said, this playoff run was the turning point of the Philadelphia 76ers. And after the game, Joel Embiid and Doc Rivers were asked about Ben Simmons, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it wasn't very positive. And then we were hearing for months and months and months they're trying to trade Ben Simmons, but they want a lot back in return for him. Which is weird, because why would a team give up a lot for somebody that has a lot of flaws, or one big flaw, not shooting? And I can understand from Philly's perspective not wanting to just take back I remember like the main trade that was talked about a lot was C.J. McCollum for Ben Simmons or Malcolm Brogdon for Ben Simmons, and like obviously picks would have been involved, but it's a very weird situation. And I would offend Ben Simmons in this. If I am constantly being talked about in trade rumors and in trade talks, and y'all don't want me here, I don't want to be here. And essentially, that is what happened. Now, Ben Simmons, he requested the trade. There was just trade, and it just never happened. It took a long, long time for that to happen. And I remember he showed up to training camp and was acting out. He had the cell phone. He wasn't doing anything. He got suspended again because of the way he was acting at training camp. I said training camp. But I understand Ben Simmons. Y'all don't want me here. I don't really want to be here. Just go ahead and trade me. Quit making me wait this out. I don't want to play with these guys that don't like me, or at least Joel. I don't think Joel hates him, but it's just like, there's obviously not that as much respect as there once was. So I understand Ben Simmons, and to his defense, he did not play a game that year for Philly. He did not play at all, but guess what? He did not play at all that season. So, in the 2021 offseason, or 21 offseason, they brought in Al Horford, Andre Drummond. I saw Al Horford, his name. And this is another weird year where Joel Embiid had a very, very big MVP run. Now, the main reason that Joel Embiid lost the 2020/21 MVP is that Nikola Jokic kept his team afloat with Jamal Murray being out. That's, I feel, the main reason Jokic won that year. Where in the 2021-22 season, again, Embiid and Jokic were neck and neck. And the whole argument for Embiid was he has his team in a top 4 seed without his number, where it's number 2. They don't have him. They don't have Ben Simmons anymore. Well, Jokic had his team afloat without his 2 or 3. But Jamal Murray didn't play at all that season, and Michael Porter Jr. didn't play a good majority of the season, and when he did, he was not that good, but he was injured. And Jokic was putting up crazy numbers, just like Embiid, but also, like I said, Embiid was out one guy. Jokic was out 2 and kept his team afloat. So I feel that was, again, one of the main reasons Embiid lost the MVP. But this season is mainly known for Simmons not playing, there being a Ben Simmons debacle, and a crazy trade that happened out of nowhere that probably should have happened a lot earlier, and that is the James Harden trade. James Harden had a big conundrum happen in Brooklyn. If you want to hear me talk about it, I made a whole Brooklyn Nets video. But the day before the trade deadline, or the trade deadline day, I should say, Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks for James Harden and Paul Millsap, who never really played. And for Brooklyn, it looked like a great deal because they obviously were not going to be getting the scoring back that James Harden would put up in Ben Simmons, but they were getting defense back, which was a main need for them, and that Ben Simmons was around shooters. That was what the main thing. For Philly, they were getting a superstar back for Ben Simmons who would play point guard because Seth Curry and Tyrese Maxey, while they are the size and have point guard-like skills, they're probably better off as a shooting guard. So in this 2021-22 season, it was Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Georges Niang, Andre Drummond, / it's funny to say it, but I'm going to say it, DeAndre Jordan. Like I said, they ended up swapping Ben for James Harden. They made the playoffs as the 4th seed and had to face the Raptors in the first round, and they dominated the first 3 games. Now, Game 3 is mainly notable for the crazy Joel Embiid game winner with seconds left. I saw the shot happen live, and I'm like, when he shot it, I thought it was going in, and then it did. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that went in. Then Game 4 happened, and Toronto wins, which we're like, okay, gentlemen's sweep. Then Game 5 happens, and Toronto wins, and we're like, oh no, Doc Rivers is probably NBA career is on the line. Because you blow a 3-0 lead, which has never been done before in the NBA, you got to be gone, and you are going to get the blame. Luckily, they do win Game 6 in Toronto, but sadly, Joel Embiid gets hurt with like minutes left. I don't remember the exact, I think it was definitely his face. He had to bring the mask back out once he got to play, but guess what? He missed the first 2 games in the Miami series, and Miami dominated because guess what? They had to play DeAndre Jordan, and they could have played Paul Reed. People were mad they didn't play Paul Reed or Charles Bassey, but just like, they definitely, none of those guys are replicating what Joel Embiid does. And so, this very much hurt Philly, because this is another good chance that they had at the playoffs, but an injury came in the way. Where that only came in the way in the 2020 season, but I personally don't think they ever had a chance that year to win. And then, this is probably the second best chance they had to win the title. No, third best. Because if you go back, I did this with the 2018-19 playoffs, so I'll do it with the 2020-21 playoffs. Hypothetically, you beat Atlanta in Game 7. You have to face Milwaukee, who still had Giannis. Giannis got hurt in the conference finals. I think you're an even, where you have the advantage in the 18-19 playoffs. I think you're more of an even team in this year's playoffs. And so it definitely would not have been as easy. Also, Giannis would have been a 2-time MVP, and Drew Holiday was there, who was a lockdown great defender. Brook Lopez had just came back. It definitely was not as easy as it would have been in the 18-19 year. Now again, if we continue with this hypothetical, you have to face the Suns or the Clippers in the finals, which Kawhi wouldn't have came back. Kawhi's injury was too severe. It's also very weird that Kawhi had a very severe injury, and they just tried to play it off like, oh, he'll come back, and he just never did. So you had to face the Suns in the finals, which I don't know. It's definitely a toss-up, but I still probably would have picked Milwaukee over Philly. Where in this year, 2021-22, you get done up by Miami. And I don't have Miami's roster in front of me, but in my opinion, it was just Jimmy Butler. It was Jimmy Butler and Bam and Tyler Hero. Kyle Lowry didn't have the craziest, playoffs. PJ Tucker offensively didn't, but, defensively he did and did his role. There's Gabe Vincent and, I almost said Duncan Robinson. Who was the other guy? Gabe Vincent, and I see it, Max Strus. I'm looking at his face in my mind. But it's just y'all let Jimmy Butler do y'all up. And he got his revenge, rightfully so. You should have brought him back. That's kind of what my mentality really with Philly is. Y'all should have brought back Jimmy Butler. Y'all should have never let Jimmy Butler go. And y'all did. So the 21-22 season comes to an end at the hands of the Miami Heat, who, again, in my opinion, all these past 2 years, against Atlanta and against Miami, you had better teams than both of them, and you lost. Something has to give. Now we're at this season, 2022 and 23. Now this is where I talk about the outlook. It's very weird. I think if you are a second round exit again, which I think is a very, very high possibility, I'm 80% sure. Because at this rate, you are probably going to play Milwaukee or Boston, which you have a terrible track record against Boston, and Milwaukee you've never faced in the playoffs, at least in this recent timeline. I don't think they're going to win. Their team this year is James Harden, who the big story in the offseason that he's took a pay cut, that way they could sign other players, mainly PJ Tucker, who you have under contract for the next 2 seasons. One of the years is a player option, which that signing might look crazy, but defensively, PJ Tucker is still very good. Offensively, he corner threes. That's the PJ Tucker way. Tyrese Maxey, who most of this year has either been hurt or coming off the bench, that way defensively, because they brought in DeAnthony Melton. They gave up Danny Green, who got hurt in the playoffs, and got DeAnthony Melton back. And as a Grizzlies fan, Philly 100% won that trade. I know we got David Roddy out of it, and if we were to talk as of this moment, I would say Philly won the trade, because DeAnthony Melton, who was mainly a bench player with Memphis, is starting now in Philly defensive-wise, and has kept, I'm not going to say he's been one of the main reasons Philly's been afloat, but he definitely has helped them out a lot. Tobias Harris, who for somebody that is making $40 million, close to $40 million, we rarely hear from him. Anytime we hear from him is when James Harden and Joel Embiid are doing good, and they're like, they need that third guy. And you would expect the guy that's getting paid the most money to be that third guy consistently. He just hasn't. I was talking in my Big 3 video. RJ Barrett, I don't like being negative, But him, R.J. Barrett, there's 100 other players I could probably name that just aren't consistent and really hurts their team and not putting them over the top. And even now, the main thing with Tobias Harris, he's getting paid a lot of money, and you are not consistent. And I do find it very hard that I don't think they would, like, he's got 1 year left. I think that would probably be the best time to trade him because I don't know if any other team was willing to commit long-term Tobias Harris $40 million, and I don't expect his next contract to be at $40 million. But who really knows? PJ Tucker, which, like I said, defensively he's still good. Offensively, he still does the same things. He's just like, he's 37 now. At some point, both sides are not going to be the same. Joel Embiid, who I'm not saying he's had a down year, but he hasn't had a top 2 MVP year like he did the previous 2 years. D'Anthony Melton already went over. Montrezl Harrell and Daniel House, who I thought, Daniel House I didn't expect much from because he was in Houston and in Utah and didn't really contribute much. So it's just really, hey, let's just bring all the Houston guys back, which Montrezl Harrell had a short tenure in Houston as well. And I thought that was going to be a great signing for him, but it's just like, it's very much nothing. Georges Niang, who was there the prior year, he comes off the bench now, or he still comes off the bench. I'm not a big Georges Niang fan. Shake Milton, who's had a resurgent year, he's played for Philly quite a while and has been very good. And it's also weird that they have a guy named Shake Milton and D'Anthony Melton, but it's spelled 2 different ways, just 2 letters. And Matisse Thybulle, who Philly fans, I've mentioned this several times in several videos, Philly fans said he was untouchable last year just because of his defensive presence. But they brought in PJ Tucker, and he just didn't play, and obviously lost a lot of value. And they traded him for Jalen McDaniels, who I'm not really going to judge in Philly just because he got there and has only played a handful of games. So, if all these years and all these breakdowns have meant anything, here it is. Drafting-wise, they are very good. When they draft a player, they're at least good in the beginning. Now, as time goes on, maybe it gets a little worse. Who really knows? Definitely sucks. Trading-wise, they only have a handful of bad trades. The Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris trades are very good, and I think you do 6 days out of 7. The Markelle for first is understandable. Josh Richardson for Seth Curry, you do that one 7 out of 7 days. The only trade I would say Philly lost on was trading Mikal Bridges. Just because you didn't have to do it. And NBA-wise, you didn't really understand what Mikal was. But it's just like, I think that's the only trade they've lost. Because again, a lot of people like to determine winners and losers of trades as they happen. I think you have to wait a while before you do that. But if you're to look at this James Harden trade, you only gave up 2 first-round picks and Ben Simmons. And Andre Drummond and Seth Curry, which Andre Drummond didn't attribute much to Brooklyn and left in the offseason. And Seth Curry, who was very good for you, but has not played a whole lot in his Brooklyn tenure due to injury. And doesn't even, I'm not going to say he doesn't play now, because he does, but it's just like, he probably is not going to be back in the next year. So you're probably not losing that much sleep over losing Seth Curry. And then Ben Simmons has just been, again, I hate being mean, but he's just been a disaster in Philly. Or not in Philly, in Brooklyn. Where with Harden has at least helped the Sixers more than Ben did. So, I would say Philly are very good at doing trades. They're very good at drafting, at least in the beginning. It's just, at the end of the day, I also got to confront this big elephant in the room. James Harden potentially going back to Houston. Which this is kind of the main reason the title of this video is this a last chance for Philly? My answer is going to be no. I think it's their second to last chance. I don't really think Harden's going back to Houston. I know there's a lot of rumors and a lot of sources saying that he is. It doesn't make sense for either team. It just really doesn't. Or either side, not team. Either side. I would say if Harden knows a superstar level player willing to request a trade because the free agents this offseason aren't the greatest. So, like, signing a guy I don't think is really going to help Philly. It would have to be a superstar or star-level player to request a trade. And then Houston, I will admit, have some assets. They have picks from Brooklyn. They don't have all their picks because they gave it up in the Westbrook and Chris Paul trade. They have Kevin Porter Jr., who I like Kevin Porter Jr., but I think the Rockets should trade him. They have Jabari Smith Jr., who I feel bad for him. He was supposed to be the first overall pick, and then just out of nowhere is Paolo Banchero, even though all year Paolo was the better player in college and was the higher watched, rated, and everything. But all year is like, Jabari Smith's going to get number one. Jabari Smith's going to get number one. And then he didn't. And like I said, I like Jabari Smith. I'm not going to be down on him. He just hasn't. And he's in Houston, which is a very weird place for basketball at the moment. It's just like guys just go out there and shoot. It's just like no real basketball being played there. I'm not going to. That's a whole other video talk about Houston. But it's talk about Harden. I think if you can convince another superstar to go there, because Houston have aspects that people probably they're willing to give up to bring in Harden and Jimmy Butler, they're probably keeping Jalen Green. I think that's the only guy that's untradeable. Sengun, who's been very good, and you continue to play, they might trade him. Houston also has the highest odds at the number one pick at the moment because they're the worst team. I'm going to make a whole video talk about what I want to see in the offseason. I don't want to see Victor Wembanyama in Houston. I'd rather see him somewhere else. If Scoot Henderson ends up in Houston, I would like it. But at that point, Harden, stay away. You don't need to go there. So I think Harden's going to stay in Philly at least this year, and then that year's going to be done. So, to recap, is this Philly's last chance? No. I think it's their second to last chance. It's definitely their last chance if Harden leaves, but I don't see that happening. I think it's their second to last chance because Tobias Harris is going to be a free agent next year. Tyrese Maxey is going to be a restricted free agent next year. All your contracts are going to be gone besides Joel Embiid. And maybe, I don't know the next year's free agency class off the top of my head. Maybe you let everybody go and bring in a guy. I don't really see that happening. And like I said, James Harden's got a contract for next year. Because I'm looking at the contracts now. But the main problem for Philly this year is they're going to have to face Boston or Milwaukee most likely in the playoffs and in the second round, which they have struggled to get out of the second round. They haven't gotten out of the second round, obviously. So, again, recapping. Philly, I went over their history. I went over their mistakes, their draft picks, their trades. They're very good at drafting. They're very good at trading compared to Portland and Brooklyn. Playoff-wise, however, they kind of been in the same realm as both teams. Again, answering the question, is this their last chance? Second to last chance. If Harden leaves, it's their last chance, but I don't see Harden leaving. It's their second to last chance because all the free agents are going to be next year. All their guys are going to be free agents next year. And then you just got Joel Embiid. And unless you're bringing another guy over there, which, again, I think is going to be very hard to do, it's going to be time to blow this up. Now, I'm very much struggling because I'm trying to, hit all the high points. That's why I probably repeated a lot of things right there. But it is what it is. So, I just went over the Philadelphia 76ers. Again, my main problem with NBA videos is it's very hard for me, at least, to, have a timeline to, the Brooklyn Nets video, they're a very hot topic when I made the video because obviously the trades and a lot of people are like, how did they mess this up? So the Brooklyn Nets video made sense. The Trailblazers video, again, that was something that I had been thinking about for quite a while, even though, like I said, the Trailblazers aren't a hot topic. If I would have made it this week, it would have been because Damian Lillard dropped 71 points and it's making me look like an idiot for what I was saying in that video. So that makes sense. Philly, again, Philly's been in that weird position all year where they haven't been talked about because it's always been Milwaukee and Boston. In the East, it's just been Milwaukee and Boston. It was Brooklyn for a hot minute, and then obviously the KD injury happened, and both the trades happened, and Brooklyn's completely out of it. Cleveland has been okay, we can see that, but it's just Cleveland lacks a lot of stuff for a deep playoff run. And like I said, Philly is ahead of both Cleveland and Brooklyn. They just don't get talked about. It's just kind of been the same thing over and over again, and at least with Boston and Milwaukee, we've seen them in the conference finals and competing for a hot minute. Where Philly, we have not seen them even in the conference finals. And it's going to be very hard for them to beat the two teams that will most likely be in the conference finals. So, like I said, timeline-wise, it's very hard to know when to make videos. Especially when I'm talking about certain teams. But I just want to get this video out there. Also, it does help that their last two losses were against teams I mentioned in this video, so it kind of makes it somewhat relevant because they obviously lost to Boston last week, on Saturday night with the Tatum game winner, Joel half-court shot that didn't count. Then they just lost to Miami on Monday night, who beat them in the playoffs and have Jimmy Butler. And then, I don't know who they play the rest of the week, but I do know they play Milwaukee on Saturday, and I anticipate they probably lose in that, which makes me sound like an a-hole, but it doesn't really matter. So, timeline-wise, when talking about a team, the next team would probably be the Lakers. And I don't really want to make a Lakers video, but I might have to. I have some wrestling videos lined up for this week. And again, if anything comes up, I'll probably try to make a video on it. So I don't know what the timeline is on my next videos. I do know I will have an AEW Revolution's prediction video up Saturday. Any videos up between then, I don't know at the moment, but I will most likely, yes, one video at least. So, thank you for watching this one. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.